All right, so we are on the worksheet titled Solving Rational Equations, and we are going to look at problem number 8 first. And so the first thing we're going to have to do is determine what our lowest common denominator is. And to do that, we are going to have to factor. So I'm going to look at m squared minus m, and that is going to turn into an m times m minus 1. The denominator here is just going to be an m. And then once again, the denominator here is going to factor into m times m minus 1. So I'm going to do two things. I'm going to say what m cannot be equal to. So if I look, m cannot equal 0. That would take and produce a 0 in the denominator. And then also, m cannot be equal to 1, because if we were to take 1 minus 1 here, that would produce a 0 there. Now looking at my lowest common denominator, I know that I'm going to have an m in it, and I'm going to have an m minus 1. And so then looking at the equation here, I'm going to take my lowest common denominator and I'm going to multiply it by my first fraction. And I'm going to see that both the m and the m minus 1 cancel out. That is going to leave me with a 1 right there. I'm then going to take my second fraction and multiply it by my lowest common denominator. The m here will cancel out with this one, and then that is going to leave me a plus m minus 1. And then I'm going to have my equal sign. I'm going to take this expression over here, and I'm going to multiply that fraction, 5 over m times m minus 1, by its lowest common denominator, which would be m times m minus 1. And so those would both cancel out. The m would cancel out with the m, and the m minus 1 would cancel with the m minus 1. That's going to leave us with the equation 1 plus m minus 1 equals 5. The 1 minus 1 will leave us with an m, and m will equal 5. The next one we're going to do is on that same equation or same worksheet of solving rational equations, and it is number 19. And so we are going to look first for the lowest common denominator. Have to do so by factoring the denominators. This will be p times p plus 1. Same thing here, p times p plus 1. And this is just a p plus 1. So I am going to have to say that my variable p cannot equal 0, which would produce a 0 in the denominator. It can also not equal a negative 1, because that would produce a 0 in the denominator. I'm then going to look at my lowest common denominator. And the lowest common denominator will be a p and a p plus 1. And so that means as I go through and multiply my fraction here, if I look at what's already here and my lowest common denominator, I can see that the p and the p plus 1 are already here. And that is my lowest common denominator. So the p would cancel out, the p plus 1 would cancel out, and that would simply just leave me with the p plus 5. If I move on, I would see that If I look at this fraction here and look at the denominator, it also contains a p and a p plus 1. And that would cancel out and leave me with just a 1. Looking at the next part, I can see that it has a p plus 1, so those would cancel out, but I need to multiply both the numerator and the denominator by a p. And so when I go to multiply that, I'm going to have this minus sign here, and then I'm going to need to multiply a p by this expression, p minus 6. And so I'm going to have to do a distributive property. And then I do want to set it equal to 0 with the squared term being positive. So I'm going to move the negative p squared over. That's going to become a positive p squared. I'm going to subtract 6p from both sides. That'll make this a negative 5p. And then I'm going to subtract 1, and that'll make me a plus 4. And then I'm now going to be able to factor two numbers that multiply to a positive 4 and add to a negative 5. And that is going to leave me with the answers of 4 and 1 for p. And then I'm just going to double check that I didn't run into the values that I'm not able to have based on the denominator not permitted to be able to be a 0.